James Bay.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very proud to rise on this legislation and the urgency of moving forward. Urgency as we've come across the worst climate catastrophe in our nation's history, the hottest summer on record. Just this past September, normally September is when fire season is over. In one weekend in September, more carbon was pumped into the atmosphere from burning Canadian forests than is normally pumped in an entire year of Canada's boreal forest fires. That's one part of the urgency. The other part of the urgency is just this past month, the International Energy Agency announced that the beginning of the end of the oil and gas industry is now foreseeable on the horizon. They're warning governments that they have to make a plan because they're going to be stuck with stranded assets if they continue to invest in an industry that can no longer compete with what's happening internationally with the rise of...
We have a point of order. I'd say that's pretty quick for Cypress Hills grasslands.
Yeah, the member knows, though, that it's actually government policy that's making it possible for companies in Canada to compete internationally.
I believe that is falling into debate. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thanks. I know that facts really tend to frighten the Conservatives. If they're feeling uncomfortable about facts, they could probably, maybe we'll get them a little safe room where they can live in disinformation. I was talking about the International Energy Agency.
A point of order, the honourable member person.
Mr. Speaker, in light of the declaration by the Speaker yesterday, I believe that this member is not subscribing to the decorum of the House that the Speaker by accusing an opposition party of disinformation.
Hi, point of order. Well, you had to be in your own seat, so there you go. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay. I just maybe continue on in the speech.
Well, thank you, Speaker. I will not be intimidated by a group of climate change deniers. I will continue to speak facts. They can interrupt me all night long.
The honourable member Sarnia.
Speaker, I have been clear. I've stood in this House. I have talked about plans for climate change reduction and everything else, and I think it's offensive that the member opposite is saying that we're climate change deniers. Thank you.
Before we continue on debate, I would make a suggestion for all members to maybe look at their phones. There is an email that would have gone out from the Speaker's office about decorum in this House of Commons to make sure that we follow those rules. Maybe try to get along a little better. Maybe try not to accuse people of a whole bunch of stuff, and we just continue on and have the debate. The honourable member, the honourable member for why not? The honourable member for I was going to say parliamentary secretary, but the deputy House leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just seeking clarification on your ruling. Are you saying that the term climate denier is unparliamentary?
Well, I think there was a whole bunch of words in here, so I just want to say people can review it, and that will take time to actually review, and maybe the honourable member for Timmins James Bay can get finished up with his discourse. The honourable member for Cypress Hills Grassland once again.
Yeah, on that same point of order, though, Mr. Speaker, it was the Speaker that was from the Liberal Party that said that the issue was out to try to get people to not use inflammatory language, which we're hearing from the member from Timmins.
Okay, that is a part of the inflammatory language line that is in that document. So the honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Speaker, because the issue that was raised was the attempt to intimidate and stop members from speaking. And I will not be intimidated. I will continue to speak if it takes all night. And I will speak out about climate change denial, whether I'm interrupted relentlessly, because these are the facts of this bill. And I will continue to speak on behalf of the work that is being done, particularly the work we've done with energy workers. So I was speaking about the urgency. And I spoke of the urgency of the climate crisis, and that certainly triggered the Conservatives. I spoke of the urgency of what the International Energy Agency is reporting, warning governments against continuing to invest in the fossil fuel industry because these are going to be stranded assets. The urgency is at the point that we are now reaching peak oil by 2025 to 2030, and when we have this falsehood that if we continue to build infrastructure, we could ignore science, we can ignore the economy, and we can ignore reality, which is something that Conservatives have done for so long. But I would like to speak to one other element of urgency of getting this legislation passed, which is the fact that the United States under the IRA in a single year has created what is being called economic shockwaves for their investments in clean tech. This is a game changer of unprecedented proportions. Now, again, I don't know any jurisdiction on the planet that chases away investment, but I know how upset the Conservatives are whenever we talk about what's happening in the United States. Offshore wind under Joe Biden in a single year. They're moving to 40 gigawatts of power. The Vineyard Wind Project will run 400,000 homes on cheap, clean energy. The Conservatives don't want you to know that because they want to continue to promote coal and oil. There's $146 billion worth of investment in the United States in offshore wind. This is something the Conservatives would shut down in a second. We're seeing it right now within 1 year, 86,000 new permanent jobs, 50,000 in EV. What we've seen is the Conservatives again and again and again ridiculing investments in battery technology and EV technology. You know, we had the member who lives in Stornoway, which I don't believe is in his riding. He showed up at Timmins James Bay to ridicule the critical mineral strategy in a mining town. I mean, for God's sake, I mean, I know the guy's had a paper route, but here's a man who comes into a mining region and says, makes fun of EV technology when our communities, our workers are going to be the ones who are building this new technology, and we're investing in it. And so we will push this government to continue to invest. You know, this legislation was very problematic for New Democrats. There wasn't a lot there. We pushed hard, and we pushed hard by working with labor, with union workers who were on the front lines. And one of the key places we went to was Alberta. Because you know what you hear from Conservatives? They always talk about workers in Alberta. They don't talk to them. They misrepresent them. So we met with the electrical workers. We met with the construction workers. We met with the boiler workers. And we said, what do you want? And they said, we know the world is changing around us. 45,000 jobs have been lost in oil and gas at a time of record profits. The workers know those jobs aren't coming back. Suncor fired 1,500 workers this year. And Richie Rich Kruger, their CEO, bragged to his investors about the urgency at a time of climate crisis to make as much money as possible. And he said he would target work, that he would make every one of those workers in Suncor prove their worth if they were going to keep their jobs. They're taking record profits, over $200 billion to big oil. They're putting into stock buybacks and automation. So the workers knew there was no future. So they said to us, we want a seat at the table. That's something New Democrats fought for in this legislation. Is it enough? No. We want to make sure that we have labor represented in the regional round tables that are moving forward. Because the idea of this government meeting with Daniel Smith without labor is a ridiculous proposition. But here's the thing, there is no place on the planet that was more ready for the clean tech revolution than Alberta. In fact, just last Christmas they were talking about the solar gold rush in Alberta. Just this past July, they were talking about how Alberta was set to become the clean energy capital of the world. And then Daniel Smith stepped up and shut it down. $33 billion. Here we go again.
A point of order from the Honourable Member for North Okanagan and Shuswap.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I believe we're talking about federal legislation in Bill C-50. The member keeps going off track, referring to provincial legislation in a province he doesn't live in a province that his party does not care about. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
It is falling into debate, so I'll just remind people to come back to the bill that we're actually debating. The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Mr. Speaker, I'll give you my notes afterwards because obviously this is what we're talking about. But I see it's very thin skin in Conservative country when you talk about their attempt to chase out investment. So here's the thing with Daniel Smith. $33 billion worth of investments killed in Alberta in clean tech. Now, if you talk to anybody in the clean tech industry, you know what they'll say internationally? What they say, oh, you're from Canada. Where is your project? If you say Alberta, it's done. You know why? Because nobody is going to invest in a jurisdiction where you have a premier who's out to kill jobs. That's why this legislation is important. We have to have workers at the table, and we have to protect the potential for new investments. So yes, we were meeting with workers in Alberta because we understood that these were serious issues, while Danielle Smith and the Conservatives over there, under the member for Stornoway, were talking about killing those jobs. And what were they doing? Who were they meeting with?
Another point of order from the Honourable Member Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I did take the liberty of pulling out the order and decorum in the House declaration by the Speaker yesterday. And in there it says, the growing tendency to make pointed criticisms in a way that is unnecessarily personal and designed to denigrate, bully, elicit an emotional reaction, or attack the integrity of the person introduces a toxicity into our proceedings that hampers our ability to get things done. This includes coming up, Mr. Speaker, with fake titles in order to mock. The honourable member just said the member from Stornoway. So I seek your guidance on this, Mr. Speaker, because this was your document, this was your declaration, and I'm asking you to enforce it. The chairs, thank you.
I want to thank the member for that, and I mean he does make a very good point when it comes to the decorum of this House and things that the Speaker actually wants us to think about when we make our presentations. And making up names comes from all sides of this House, and maybe we should stop doing it, period. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
I hope none of my time has been cut off, Speaker, by these panic attacks from the Conservatives. And as far as making up names, I'm talking about Danielle Smith and the Conservative Party, and the fact that the member who lives in Stornoway was up for cutting off all these jobs. These are facts. They might not like facts, but...
The honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
And again, Mr. Speaker, I refer to the fake title. If he's referring to the honourable member and leader of the opposition, then he should refer to him as that. Or the member from Carleton, he should not refer to him as the member from Stornoway. Again, I refer to your document, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
And I'll go to the Honourable Deputy House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the member from Timmins James Bay, and trust me, I don't get up to defend him often, but the member from Timmins James Bay explicitly said the member who lives in Stornoway. There's nothing that is untrue about that.
All right, I say in the House, I have to refer to all members of the House by their riding names. And I think maybe we should all start using our riding names when we're referring to one another in the House. So, member for Carleton, the leader of the opposition, member for St. Catharines, Barrie Innisfil. So, yeah, I think that's, and hopefully the member for West Nova when he's not standing in this chair. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, and I really appreciate that, Speaker. I don't even get to go back.
I know, I should remember. The honourable member for Barrie Springwater Oromadante.
Just a point of order, Speaker. I just thought we've been talking a lot about proper decorum in the House. I thought the rules were every time you rose to speak, that people are supposed to take their seats so you can speak properly. I see that's not being done. Am I wrong in that, or should people be sitting once you stand up to speak?
It is another. The speaker actually did. The speaker actually did say that yesterday. That we're wanting people to stay sitting until it's time for them to stand up and get the eye of the speaker. Listen, I will just say this right now. I'll say this now. That's enough, thank you. But I would say that the honourable member has 12 minutes and 24 seconds. We've been stopping the clock the whole time. He's got the whole time that he needs. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Thank you, and Speaker, you know, I would have sat down, but at my tender age with my back, the fact that the Conservatives get panic-stricken every time I start talking about how much they're against technology, how much they're climate deniers, and the fact that the member, what riding is he from? Carleton, whatever, who lives in a 19-room mansion with his own personal chef paid for by the taxpayer is a fact, so I know they get triggered.
Order. It is my duty pursuant to Standing Order 38 to inform the House that the questions be raised tonight at the time of adjournment are as follows. The Honourable Member for Yorkton Melville on Agriculture and Agri-Food, the Honourable Member for Spadina Fort York on Foreign Affairs, and the Honourable Member for Skeena Bulkley Valley on Agriculture and Agri-Food. The Honourable Member for Timmins James Bay.
Here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope that wasn't a point of order on this really important issue, but I will try to continue because this is important. And we actually saw this at our committee where the issue of sustainable jobs is a top mind issue to Canadian workers, and yet the Conservatives have done everything to slow it down, to attack it. this is a big issue because there are problems with this legislation, and our job is to fix it, not to obstruct something that is badly needed, because I want to get to the point of what we are up against in terms of Mr. Biden. In the first week of the Biden administration, the very first week, he signed an executive order creating an interagency working group on energy transition. That was his first week. What he did then was set up this transition group to make sure that energy-dependent regions weren't left behind. So Biden came out of the gate in his first week. Biden went to COP26 and said that America would create a new clean energy economy based on good-paying union jobs. Because he knew that he had to send a signal that he was going to fight for the middle class, unlike what we see with the Conservatives, who are out to shut down job investments in Alberta, to attack investments in the battery plants, and it leaves us with, my God, the Liberals, who have never talked about these issues before. They were dragged kicking and screaming by New Democrats, and we said, listen, we have to have some really key investments here. We need commitments here, clarity. So, for example, prevailing wages. We need to say, if you're going to get tax credits to do energy investment in Canada, they have to be good-paying union jobs.
Here, here.
We need to make sure apprenticeships are part of the mix. Now, what we have from the promised $85 billion in clean energy tax credits, it sounds great. It's not here yet. We're going up against a government that within their first year had set up their energy transition, a government in the United States that has, now we're talking that there will be 9 million direct jobs from the IRA. We have to compete with them. And I've heard, Mr. Speaker, this constant drivel from the Conservatives of misinformation about what the Premier of Germany asked for Canada. The Premier for Germany, I met him. He said, we're not interested in LNG. We're interested in the long term, and what we're interested in is hydrogen.
Point of order from the honourable member for Sarnia.
So, Mr. Speaker, I would just point out that Germany did then, in 194 days, build an LNG terminal. So I think that they were interested in LNG.
That is a point of debate, not a point of order. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay.
Well, it's amazing. No wonder that the German Chancellor didn't bother to meet with the Conservatives, because he would have heard stuff like that. But he met with us, and I met with him personally. And he said that LNG was not where they were going, that they were moving so far ahead on green energy that they were either Canada was going to provide hydrogen or Canada was going to be out of the mix. That was the message we got. Meanwhile, we get this continual misinformation. But where do we get that? Well, when the Conservatives go to Europe, who do they meet with? Well, there's Dan McTeague. I mean, talk about Gerbunkers, climate change denier, who somehow paid for 4 Conservatives to fly to the UK, put them up in big hotels. He's my cousin, by the way, so I'm not saying anything out of family. But Dan McTeague, apparently, in his group, paid in one thing for 3 bottles of wine that came to $1,800 Canadian. I mean, who drinks booze like that? But it wasn't just the So this is again a party that goes on about affordability and goes on about the price of potatoes. Man, they can certainly afford it when they're being given a bottle of wine that was $818 Canadian. Do you think they would even know what an $818?
Number 4, Barry Innisfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm certainly not going to speak about the NDP leader's $30,000 trip to Las Vegas, but I'd like to know what the relevance of his discussion is in relation to the bill. I think it's a valid point of order. Thank you.
I will accept that. The honourable member for Timmins James Bay on the bill.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Speaker. It allows me to go back. I was responding to the previous intervention and attack on me by a Conservative who said that she contested what was said by the Chancellor of Germany to me in a meeting, and I was saying, well, we were meeting with the Germans about energy. The Conservatives went over. We don't know who they met with, but it is worth noting an $818 bottle of wine. There was then a second bottle of wine for $265. That still is probably pretty good. That's not sparkling baby duck.
And we have a point of order from the honourable member for Barrie Innisfil.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I certainly will not speak to the NDP leader's ethical violation as it relates to a gift he received And I want to know what the relevance is. I want to know what the relevance is to this in relation to the bill that we're debating.
Thank you, and again, I'll urge people to have a look at the Speaker's ruling that we had yesterday. And again, page 8. This includes coming up with fake titles for members in order to mock them, or comments that question their courage, their honesty, or their commitment to their country. So a lot of that in debates lately. So let's try to bring that debate further up. I know the honourable member for Timmins James Bay is really wanting to talk to the bill at hand.
Thank you so much for that, and I just have to say I think why I'm getting so much interference is I'm getting to the punchline, and then I'll move on, but I think it would be unfair to intimidate me and have my ability to speak circumscribed, because it's about what our priorities are. And our priorities as New Democrats has been workers and people particularly from the natural resources industry like I come from. I live in a mining town. A town that is looking for the clean energy future, and nobody in my town would be given a $719 bottle of wine. Oh my God, what was in that wine? But I am coming to the conclusion, at the end of this night, with these 4 Conservatives paid for apparently by my cousin Dan McTeague over in the UK, meeting somebody we don't know, they had a bottle of champagne for $1,791 Canadian. I mean, that is obviously not sparkling baby duck. I don't know who bought that for them. And I ask that, Mr. Speaker, because what we're talking about is we're talking about the insecurity of workers at a time of transition. Do we wish there was a transition? No. We're used to living the way we've lived. I've lived through transitions. It ain't pretty. Cobalt, where we lost every single silver mining job in one summer. When our iron ore mines shut down, there was no future there. We know the word transition, and we know it ain't pretty. This was something we heard from workers in Alberta and workers in other regions. They said, what's just about a transition? How do you make it so that we have some place to go to? And this was the New Democratic plan from the beginning that we negotiated with the Liberals. The Liberals initially said to us they were going to put a job center as their solution. And we were like, a job center sends a message that you're turning out the lights and leaving. Where are you going to put that job center? You're going to put it in Fort Mac? You're going to put it in St. John's? We needed something broader, something bigger. So what we pushed for was the sustainable jobs legislation that serves as the framework. And this is the important thing. We need a framework around how these tax credits are going to be implemented. Because we know that if we don't have a plan, it'll be just a gong show of friends, pals, lobbyists who are going to be sucking up this money, as unfortunately happens all too often in Canada. We need to compete the way the United States has, which they brought an all-of-government approach to make sure that they were making a truly transformative revolution. And I'll say another thing that they talked to us about in Europe, Mr. Speaker, when we were in Germany. The Germans were very, very concerned about the IRA because of the competitiveness. So over in Europe, 4,000 kilometers away, they were concerned how were they going to be able to compete against Joe Biden and the massive amount of investment that's moving out of Europe and is going to move to the United States. Well, we are right on the American border. So when $33 billion gets sucked out of Alberta, where do you think it goes? It goes stateside. In my region, talking to miners and mining companies, the first thing they said to me, did you see the tax credits Joe Biden put in? They're really interesting to us. We have to be able to say, yeah, we are here too, and we will compete, and we will make sure that the investment stays here. Now, again, I'm dealing with the Liberal government. We're trying to make this work. We're saying, for example, there's a lot of things missing in this plan. The Sustainable Jobs Secretariat, what is that? Is that going to be just some desk in some minister's office, or is it going to have a true mandate? The Partnership Council, what is that? Are we actually looking at something credible here? So what we're going to be insisting, while the Conservatives try and filibuster that committee and that legislation, we're going to be insisting on checks and balances to make sure. We want to make sure that regional representation is there. We want to make sure that labor is there with enough voices representing enough regions of the country, because they're the ones who are going to be dealing with the implementation of that, not us. We want to make sure that Indigenous rights are fully respected and implemented, and part of that is in the tax credit incentives. They're going to be different in different areas, and they're going to certainly be different facing and the opportunities for Indigenous, and we need to make sure that they are front and center. The other thing that we really want to know, we want to have a youth voice on the Stewardship Council or the on the council, because we want to make sure that those who are number one being affected by the climate disaster that's unfolding have their future interests at stake. We need to make sure that the tax credits work. We need to make sure that they're being implemented in a way. We need to have better data collection. What the Liberals are offering us on data collection right now is insufficient. There wouldn't be a job left in Canada by the time they report back. There needs to be mechanisms that come back to Parliament to tell us, is this working? Because if it doesn't work, it's going to affect our environment, number one, but it's going to affect working class families from one end of the country to the other. And what we were really surprised with, again, with the all-of-government approach taken by the Biden administration, is we've seen in 1 year staggering turnaround in terms of projects getting off the ground, in terms of jobs, in terms of commitments. So that's where we're at as New Democrats. We believe that we have a huge opportunity right now. Is this bill perfect? It's far from perfect. But what we can do in a minority parliament is come in with good plans and good amendments to make it happen. Unlike our Conservative colleagues who want to go back to the 19th century, it ain't going to happen. I'm sorry, that world's gone. What we need to do is to say, we have an opportunity, and if we don't compete, we're going to be at the side of the road because the United States is moving ahead. And I will just conclude on this, Mr. Speaker. Let's consider Texas. I mean, Texas politically is about as out there and right-wing as the Conservative backbench. And yet, 890,000 clean tech jobs are in Texas right now. There is no other jurisdiction in the world right now that has invested as much in clean tech as Texas. And Texas came through the most brutal heat wave, killer heat wave, able to turn on all their air conditioners. Meanwhile, Danielle Smith was going around saying, oh my God, if we have clean power, we're going to have to turn the power off. And she was paying for these trucks to drive up and down Ottawa saying, my God, if you invest in Canada, we're going to run out of energy. I mean, what kind of premier goes around advertising in an energy-rich province that the lights are going to be turned off? The reality is that we get these clean energy projects off the ground, it's going to dramatically decrease costs for families. It's going to give the working class and middle class steady jobs, and it's going to save our planet. We will go to these hearings, and we will push for strong amendments.